The Broncos have made a handful of roster moves to get down to the 80-man roster limit, which we will look at in just a moment. But first, I want to tell you about today's proud sponsor, Mint Mobile. With plans starting as low as $15 a month, ditch your current cell phone provider and get with Ryan Reynolds and Mint Mobile. Start saving today at mintmobile.com/chatsports. We'll tell you more about their awesome benefits later on in the show. But like I mentioned, it is roster cut day. The Broncos made a handful of moves to get down to the 80-man roster limit. They waived some players. We got some injury updates. Plus, they signed someone. So a lot of news to go over on today's show. We'll break all that down for you guys. But first, I want to ask this question right off the top. This is usually something we say for the end of the show, but I want everyone to be in on this action. If you are a member of our Broncos country, I mean the Broncos country right here on the Broncos Breakdown, drop a Let's Ride in the comments section. Everyone makes fun of the Broncos and Russ for his corny little Let's Ride, but you know what? Let's embrace it. Broncos country, let's ride. You know who's not riding this season with us? It's Joe Schobert. Sorry for the mean transition, Joe. Mean Joe. So he was cut today, though. This is one of the 5 moves the Broncos made, and this is probably the biggest name/noteworthy move because the Broncos signed Joe Schobert just 8 days ago on August 15th, right after the Jonas Griffith injury, and it only took 8 days for George Paton to go, you know what? We see why you were probably still a free agent in the middle of August. You're not in football shape. He did not play well against the Bills, which, in his defense, no one played well against the Bills, but he definitely stood out as a weaker linebacker core that was out there. And so ultimately, after one preseason game, George Paton decides we will move on. Now, when we look at this depth chart here, if Jonas Griffith is unable to play week 1 against the Seahawks, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment, it's going to be Josie Jewell and Alex Singleton, most likely your starting inside linebackers. Now, here's the Brian Windhorst deep conspiracy. Could this release of Joe Schobert signal that Jonas Griffith is going to be returning sooner rather than later? He was spotted at practice today working off on the sideline, so keep your eye on that. Next move that was made, the Broncos waived Trey Quinn, Mr. Irrelevant for the Washington football team, or Commanders now, Redskins at the time back in 2018. I'm canceled for that. So Trey Quinn, he is waived, though. In preseason, he had a good game against the Bills, which sucks to see. He had like 5 receptions, 47 yards off the top of my head. And you always hate to see this happen where someone balls out in the preseason and they get cut the next day or 2 days later, and you're like, how? He just had the best game of his life so far. Well, unfortunately, that's what preseason separates from regular season, where the Broncos, hey, we look at our depth chart here and we know, unfortunately, you might have a spot on someone else's roster, but it's not going to be on our roster here because this Broncos wide receiver room is pretty loaded between Courtland Sutton, Judy, Hamler, Hinton. Well, those top 3 guys are absolute locks. I think Kendall Hinton is pretty safe to make this roster. Montrell Washington's a lock. Tyree Cleveland, Brandon Johnson, Seth Williams, they're all battling for wide receiver 5, 6. So, unfortunately for Trey Quinn, just no room, no ice he can punch through to try and crack this roster. Before we look at the rest of the list here, I want to tell everyone about our proud sponsor today, which is Mint Mobile. They even say your mom will pick up the phone and be calling you so much, you're going to have to say, Mom, you know what? Dial it back a little bit because thanks to cell phone plans starting as low as $15 a month, your phone, you're going to get a separate phone for how busy your main phone is because your homegirl ain't going to like all your side chicks calling you. That sounded so weird, Trace. I'm so sorry. But hey, listen, with cell phone plans running on the largest 5G network, you're going to be hunky-dory. Start right now at mintmobile.com/chatsports. Links in the comments and the description of today's show. You will not want to miss out. Plus, Ryan Reynolds, way better than Ryan Gosling. Let's look at Stevie Scott III. He was waived today, and this is actually tied to another move they made. If you don't know Stevie Scott, he is like a college football Big Ten legend. He had some great seasons for the Indiana Hoosiers. He was with the Saints before coming over to Denver, and ultimately the Broncos have seen enough out of him. Now, before we talk about sort of the corresponding move with that Stevie Scott wave right there, we are just under 300 subscribers away from reaching 9,000 subs. 20 days until week 1. We've got 20 days to pick up 264 subs. So if you have not subscribed, head on down there and click that sub button. All right, so this was the corresponding move with the Stevie Scott release, with the waiving. Yesterday, the Broncos were awarded, I love when they say awarded, it sounds so weird, but Divine Ozigbo. What's that, Trey? Ozigbo. So good timing here. Saints producer and host right here, Trace Gerard, right on the 1s and 2s. So they were awarded him, and clearly the Broncos see maybe some special teams flair in Ozigbo because they don't have a huge hole in the running back room. It's pretty well tightened up between Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon, and Mike Boone. Most teams carry 3 running backs. At this point, hey, we like what we saw. Maybe we can put you on our practice squad and think about you down the road. Next move that was made is not the same as the previous 3 right here. Casey Tucker was waived with injury designation. This is a time of year where you see a lot of weird terminology and lingo. What this means is that if he clears waivers, Tucker will return to the Broncos on IR. Now, they can do an injury settlement, buy him out so he can go to free agency. That ain't going to happen most likely. So he'll stay with the Broncos as long as he clears waivers, and he'll sit on IR and in the training room all season. Kind of a stash to keep him for next season. So now we look at this offensive line that's starting to get whittled down a little bit right here. And we have no more Casey Tucker, and we're starting to get a better concrete look at not just the top 5, because the top 5 really hasn't changed at all in the last month or so, but now we're starting to see the competition for usually teams carry 9 offensive linemen, so the next 4 guys starting to slim down a little bit. You know it's going to be either Calvin Anderson or Billy Turner as that 6-man swing tackle, and Moody's going to make the roster. He's injured right now, but he'll be there. I think Luke Wattenberger might have a good chance, Cam Fleming as well. Graham Glasgow's going to make it unless they want to save some money by releasing him. So that is the offensive line look right there. Speaking of the Hogs up front, Tom Compton, he was placed on the reserve PUP list. He was on the PUP list. He was technically on the active PUP list. Now, what does that mean when you get put on the reserve PUP list? He cannot return until week 7. So he does not count against the Broncos' 53-man roster, but he cannot return to action until after 6 weeks of the season. This is an injury that is more serious than maybe the Broncos anticipated a couple weeks or months ago, or they knew about it all along. Regardless, he ain't coming back anytime soon, but they like what he can offer in terms of a flex depth Swiss Army knife. You've seen him line up all over the offensive line, especially last year for the 49ers. So Compton is a guy to watch for. After 6 weeks of the season, take him off the reserve PUP, and he can return to the active 53-man roster. Now, before we wrap up today's show, help me out by helping everyone who got, unfortunately, cut today by sending some good luck vibes and wishes their way. Cut day sucks. No one enjoys being cut. No one likes cutting anyone. You hate to see it. Every time you watch Hard Knocks, you fall in love with some guys, and then you realize the human aspect of this, and it's not just stats and numbers. So wish everyone who was released today across the NFL some good luck by typing that down in the comments. Before we wrap up today's show, roster cut dates. So we have checked off this box, and this one is in 1 week. That's the big kahuna, right? That's when the Broncos and George Paton have to eliminate 27 players from their 80-man current roster limit all the way down to the final 53-man roster. So 27 cuts have to be made over the next week, which is why this final Broncos preseason game is very important for a lot of these bubble roster players trying to make their roster and earn a spot. So watch out for this Broncos-Vikings Week 3 preseason games. You're going to see a lot of guys busting their tails, doing everything they can to secure themselves one of those last coveted spots on the roster. That is going to do it for us on today's show. I really appreciate everyone that clicked onto it, made us a part of your day, included us in your Broncos news and rumors rotation. And hey, if you haven't subscribed yet, or if you already have, share it with a friend that loves the Broncos, friend or family member. And if you have not already, make sure you go ahead and click that subscribe button.